Welcome to Streams, Lakes, and Deltas, Not a Nature podcast, presented by REARC and its partners. This week we are joined by three engineers who gave talks at Databricks Data and AI Summit 2026. Hosted by Weston Kimbrough, a lead data engineer, Databricks champion, and a passionate tech evangelist. Welcoming Riley Nastase, an expert on pie and gooses, a trailblazer in the domain of AI, and a lead AI engineer. Also welcome Aaron Beyer, a Databricks champion, a data modeling whiz, and a staff data engineer. And last but not least, Dylan Mills, who's an expert on LakeWatch and its related technologies, as well as a lead cybersecurity engineer at REARC. Tune in as they talk about their experience speaking at DAIS 2026, their thoughts on the recent announcements, and critical insights in the current state of data, AI, and cybersecurity. Here we go.
Hi everyone, I am Weston Kimbrough. Welcome back to Streams, Lakes, and Deltas, Not a Nature podcast. We are joined here with three of REARC's greatest. We're here with Aaron, Dylan, and Riley. All of them gave a talk recently at Data and AI Summit, and we are here to discuss all about those talks. So I'm going to let each one of you go around and let everyone know who you are. Let's start with Aaron.
Hey y'all, Aaron Beyer, staff data engineer here at REARC. I've been in the data space for about 8 years or so. Initially started in data science and then going over to data engineering, but generally working in kind of the fintech and kind of finance type space. I've been at REARC for about 2.5 years now, mainly working on Databricks-centric projects. And yeah, I have loved working at REARC ever since, and mainly kind of jumped on because of the high, strong engineering culture and being able to work on a lot of different things. And yeah, I recently spoke at the Databricks' summit on specifically a project I worked on with the MasterCard team to look at building a CDP on Databricks.
Very nice. Dylan, go right ahead.
Yeah, Dylan Mills. I'm a lead cybersecurity engineer here at REARC. Been with the company for about 2 years. I've been working with Databricks the whole time, so in the grand scheme of things, relatively new to the data engineering world, but for 7 years prior to that, I was in the healthcare cybersecurity space. Joined REARC specifically because security tends to funnel into a more of a silo. You don't get to touch a lot of the technologies and do a lot of the new things, learn a lot of different aspects when you're stuck kind of, reviewing architecture. So yeah, that was my jump over to REARC to be able to, do whatever I want to be doing.
And that leaves me, I guess. So I'm Riley Nastase. I've been at REARC for, 4 years now, but I've been in the data and AI space for 8. Like Aaron, starting out in data science, and when he pivoted to data engineering, I've gone more heavily in the Gen AI route. So I'm a lead AI engineer here. I lead AI delivery across various engagements, various industries as we try to put AI agents into production. Since we're all talking about what we love about REARC, they make me feel dumb in a good way. I just love working with smart people. I love working at a place where we're trusted to build stuff of really high quality. So I'm here because I also spoke at the summit. My talk was focused on building agents for use in SOCs to accelerate detection engineering.
Awesome. Thank all of you. And these talks are really interesting. I know that's a general theme too of REARC and kind of engineering excellence that can kind of be overwhelming at the same time. So let's get right into it. So the core of this, we'll talk a little bit about Data AI Summit and kind of, what all happened, some announcements, things like that. But I actually want to dive more into your talks first. So Aaron, I'd like to start with you and building that CDP. That sounds really interesting, especially for me being a fellow data person. Could you go a little more in detail? What did you build and why? What was kind of the use case around?
Yeah, sure. So this was in conjunction with a specific marketing team at MasterCard. And more or less, they had lots of different marketing tools and kind of data scattered all over the place. And they really wanted kind of one spot where they can kind of see everything. So not only be able to see all the data they have scattered everywhere, but to also kind of enrich it and combine it and be able to really kind of act on it. And, initially mainly like dashboards and things like that, but of course, looking to add AI and things in the future. So yeah, it's more or less trying to build that customer data platform. And I think they specifically went to Databricks because it makes it really easy to kind of ingest and transform data, and it makes it a little bit more straightforward for AI and data compared to kind of more of the maybe niche like marketing or ad tools that they were using that and also would only give them like a snapshot or like only a part of their whole kind of marketing ecosystem.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Something that I think comes up fairly often, even in the Databricks world where we have so many different tools around AI and kind of implementing your data with that. What kind of challenges do you typically see or maybe have already run across with kind of implementing these traditional systems that are largely built around, building dashboards? We have like BI marts and things like that, versus now we're kind of moving towards more AI centered, not just dashboarding, but also, agentic tooling, things like that. People kind of want like a Q&A out of their data. Does that change how we go about these different kind of data structures or, all the relationships built around that?
I think definitely in many ways, but I think many of the things that we ended up doing were kind of things that probably are good for even kind of more human-based understanding of the data. So a lot more context. So like adding like what do all these tables represent? What can you do with these tables? And then specifically kind of in the more the Databricks sphere, we were using metric views to allow us to like be able to very clearly define like for these like key important KPIs, like how these are defined and when to use them and things like that. So you don't have like so it's all about context, right? So you don't have the AI kind of try to determine things its own way. And I think the other thing we kind of focus a lot on too is to focus a little bit more on kind of materialized views versus more of like the traditional facts and dimensions, just because we were seeing some issues with like AI not able to determine what tables need to be joined together or yeah, things like that.
Yeah, in preparing for that talk, was there anything that kind of like stood out to you? Any kind of takeaways that you have? Anything that you wish maybe you covered more on? Maybe there's like a question you prepared for. I know a lot of us prepare for talks and we kind of have questions in the back of our head that we're like, man, I'm ready. I hope someone asks this. And no one asked it, right? So is there anything like that kind of walking away from the summit talk that you get?
I think so. Something that I guess maybe it was a 40-minute talk, but what I was a little bit surprised by was just how much we could have presented. And so there was a lot that got cut out. And unfortunately, being on more of the tech side of things, a lot of that was from the more tech angle. So I think we covered like the business case really well, but from the tech side, so we used like a data modeling framework called Data Vault. And like one really good benefit of this was that it added some interesting constraints to what we could do. So it added constraints with regards to how we were onboarding our data and how we were transforming it initially. So there was some key benefits there. Like, so I think a key part of the talk was flexibility and speed. And actually having constraints so you couldn't onboard the data however you wanted or in what kind of format was ended up turning out very helpful, especially when you have to bring in a lot of different sources. And the other thing that I kind of would have liked to talk about more if I had time was more from the consulting angle of just like what do you do when you have data and sometimes it's organized in a certain way coming in like a CRM's kind of more database, but this is not exactly how the client uses it. So like working especially with like trying to understand like, okay, so especially if you have hundreds and hundreds of columns, like what's important to you and like what relationships are important and kind of realizing and trying to work with the fact that like every like in this case every marketing team is going to see this data differently and just kind of trying to work through, especially when you have a lot of voices, like what makes sense.
Yeah, no, and we'll definitely talk on some consulting perspectives here in a minute. I want to give the other guys a chance to talk as well. So, Dylan, let's pivot over to you and kind of what all your talk was about. Let's get a deeper dive and kind of dig in a bit more there as well.
Nice, yeah. So my talk was titled Securing the Grid, Modernizing Energy and Utility Security Operations with LakeWatch. So I had the unique point of I had two other presenters. They were Databricks people that we worked with on the Australia side for one of our mutual clients, Energy Queensland. So in my perspective side, the Energy Queensland client that was supposed to be coming over wasn't able to anymore. So I kind of jumped in last minute to provide the implementation side of what we did. But the talk in whole was very interesting. I honestly, it was great just kind of sitting there listening to the other two talk too about like cybersecurity in the energy space is this like vast domain of like hyper specific like data that is siloed and we're not able to view it but there's a ton of attacks that are, happening on this like decentralized network, right? Like apparent from what in the talk, like home solar is more common than like swimming pools in Australia. Like everybody has this kind of like subsystem, basically like sub power system in their houses. How do you protect against that? So they did a really good job of kind of covering that. Things like the Frosty Goop attack, where this malware took down, heating in hot water in Ukraine in the winter, like what the use case is for, why you'd want to up your game in the utility sector. My particular part was going over LakeWatch. So what did we do in terms of bringing new data sources in for Energy Queensland, how we built them detections from our security content library, how we kind of did a little bit more of like talking with their security team, because this is a very data systems and cybersecurity systems very different. We kind of act as the liaison. So like the kind of story of like they're used to SPL and the traditional kind of like threat hunting, approach. How do you do that with SQL, and how do you do that with PySpark, and how do you, work with Delta tables and scale and things like that. So yeah, that was mostly what, at least my part was.
Yeah, no, that's what's really interesting to me is kind of the LakeWatch piece of this, right? Like we have a very new product coming out of Databricks. I doubt there's a ton of implementations with it, and so this sounds like, if not the first, one of the very early adopters of something like this, right? So were there any challenges involved in that? Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we get these new products coming out, we test them, we try them, and, maybe even sometimes we're like, whoa, customer's excited, hold off, but it's not ready yet, right? And we tell them kind of when we think the product is, kind of ready to go live, ready for them to start working with. So any kind of challenges around that you came across?
Yeah, in particular when we did this engagement, like you said, this was a super early one. So at the time, LakeWatch only really supported cloud storage like via autoloader. So we were able to pull in data from S3, and everything else outside of that would have been needed to be custom. So the sources we had to target kind of scoped out the OT sector, like the actual data that's coming from these like energy systems. So we focused on like what we can do to like one-to-one with what they're doing right now with IT. So in the terms of like ingestion, that's kind of what we had to focus on. In terms of like capabilities, at the time, Genie and Genie Spaces had just come out with the ability to do the research agent. So like a automated like plan of attack of like how you're going to like incrementally like accomplish this goal of like a threat investigation. That was we had to get it enabled for the Energy Queensland workspace so I could show it to them. And now, how many months later, we have like all of these different new systems that are coming out, like Genie code in LakeWatch. We have Genie Ops or Zero Ops, I forget. All of these different mechanisms that are going to enable more use cases. Those are the main ones I can think of.
Yeah, no, I mean, what's kind of cool about it is it sounds very like cutting edge on the product side, right? You're using a lot of the newer pieces that recently came out, or in your case, as you're implementing it, just came out, right? And you're showcasing these things. So no, that's really cool. Is there anything, kind of from that talk? I know you presented with others, so yours should have been maybe a little longer than Aaron's, or it might have been the same. So. I'm actually forgetting.
Yeah. I think we had it was 40 minutes. I'm not sure, Aaron, if yours was also
okay.
40.
Yeah, I forgot if the multi-person was, all 40 minutes or if there was
we had
a panel one.
We got an exception for the three people, actually. Like we had to contact them to say like, hey, can we bring in Dylan as like this, third presenter to talk the LakeWatch section? But yeah, the only downside to that was, so 3 people talking, and a live demo that I did at the end was not any time for Q&A. So I tried to do as much Q&A at the end, and then we got kicked out of the room, and then I did a bunch of Q&A in the hallway, and then we had to run straight to the next presentation, which was Riley's. So
how does that work, right? Like, I think so often we go to these conferences and you're sitting in a room and there's, anywhere from like, sometimes you go to a small talk and it's nice. There's maybe like 10 to 20 people and you can kind of really get involved. But sometimes you go into those rooms and it's like hundreds of people. There's people standing in the back and everything. Like, how, from a presenter, do you try to connect with all of them, make sure their questions are answered, even after the fact, right? Like, you're even saying you had to run to another talk. I'm sure there were some people that almost wanted to chase you down and be like, well, hold on, right?
Yeah, it surprised me. I had a bit of a line of people. So the presenter that was coming after Kristen, who works for Databricks, I was like just mentioning like, oh, hey, this is how you do the live demo. Like this is like, oh, 'cause she was interested, right? I turn around and there's a line of people waiting to talk, and then the people are like ushering us out. So yeah, it was great because it was a full room and there was seemingly a lot of interaction, like questions people had afterwards, which means they were interested. A lot of questions mostly around like just agentic sock and Genie. Like a lot of people had questions about, all right, I'm doing it this way today. I hear it can be expensive. How are you doing it? What are you doing for X, Y, and Z? Connect on LinkedIn or whatever. So it was just try to get as many questions in as possible for the most part.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think being at those conferences, you get, pretty overwhelmed even as just an attendee of, trying to get your questions in, trying to actually learn and absorb as much as you can. And we'll kind of touch more on that in a bit. But Riley, it is your time to shine. I would love to hear more, and I think Dylan actually gave you a bit of a good segue into what you did. So,
Yeah, agents in the SOC, right? Which is funny because Dylan's talk was primarily on Lake Watch and cyber capabilities, which comes with agents natively, and mine was more on agents. And Dylan was getting all the agent questions, and I was getting all the Lake Watch questions. So that was a good time. Next time we'll have to answer questions together. But anyway, I was presenting on the problem of using agents to assist in writing detections quickly. So this is based on work we did with a client of ours who's a major hedge fund who's running into this problem. And you'd think, well, why is that a challenge, right? Using agents to make things that nobody likes doing faster. And it's actually really fascinating because, if you work with coding agents on a day-to-day basis, you know this in your soul, right? There's a happy medium between I want to use a tool that accelerates my work because the demands are only increasing faster. And we feel that in the cyberspace, right? All the hype around mythos and vulnerabilities and more potential attackers that have exposure to tools that can cause them to do more damage and cause more leaks in your infrastructure and more people wandering around. So the threat is scaling. We have to move faster. But then on the other side, if you use Claude Code and you kind of get into one more prompt land and you just keep going and you don't stop to slow yourself down, you build something that is simply useless. And one of the things our client found and we found was the last thing we want to do is take experts out of the loop, right? So we can all talk about like how do you build agents that leverage a person's expertise? How do you build agents that automate the boring stuff or the tedious stuff or the easy stuff to allow people who really know what they're doing in the cyberspace to leverage the information they have to guide the agent to the right places? So a lot of what we were focusing on was just identifying that problem and then trying to put forward some practical solutions to that problem.
Gotcha, yeah. No, it's kind of an interesting use case because I think it's incredibly common. It's something I think a lot of us are running into where it's just, hey, build this. By the way, AI's out, like you should be building it 10x faster, all these kinds of crazy deadlines now. Right, yeah. Sorry for those of you in consulting hearing this. But, we run across that all the time, right? So I guess really the core of it is what actually makes a good system in this case, right? How can you automate these tasks and not end up with just slop that comes out of the oven, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's a big question. If we could answer that question, we'd all make lots of money. But at a high level, I think it's important to recognize that the agents, right, in their training and then in their post-training and their tuning, they're designed to do something. And what is that thing? They're designed to provide a response that satisfies the query. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean, if you say, go build a thing, it is more likely to just go ahead and spin until it builds the thing. And you might, be a Claude Code user and use plan mode and it'll ask you a few questions. But if you've used these tools a lot, you'll notice they're quite eager to just get on with it and get to a solution because they're designed to close the loop. So I find the most practical thing is understanding what loop is the agent trying to close, right? If you're trying to get an agent to assist you in writing detections and your system prompt reflects that, you're a detection writing agent, then it's going to skip past important aspects simply to go write the detection. So you can't say don't do that because then the model has a very ambiguous target. I find the better approach is to give the model something else to aim for. So if you know you're a cyber engineer, you want to be the one making the calls, but there are things that you don't know in the data. What we do is we leverage system prompts or we leverage tools to say, okay, go find ambiguity. Go find things that will alter my perception of how I should solve this problem. So you're not suppressing the model's impulse to resolve something, you're just giving them a different target, right? Like, don't go direct detection, go find stuff. That's important to me, that's what success looks like. Bring it back to me, let me answer those questions, and then you can send off the agent to write a detection query that's a little bit more meaningful. I think that's by far the biggest one.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of, kind of fine-tuning prompts and getting correct behavior out of the system, which is, I think we all know that's a huge challenge in of itself. So with your talk specifically, right, so what all was implemented, like what was the biggest issues that you ran across, any kind of, feedback that you wish you had talked about in the talk itself as well?
Yeah, I definitely sympathize with, I think it was Aaron who said you could have talked about so much more. In terms of difficulty, I'd say, so we built this in 2025, right? We built this in, gosh, can I call 2025 the dark ages of AI already? So all you AI people will cringe, but this was a LangGraph based application. So we built a bunch of custom tools rather than saying, let's just go give the model a SQL tool. You see, a year ago even, trying to build effective guardrails, even in a Databricks environment around running arbitrary SQL in a Databricks environment with an LLM having access to that was a little scary. So a lot of the time we spent was writing thousands of lines of custom LangGraph code to orchestrate the flow, but also to write the right finite set of tools that could take in a finite set of parameters, bring back some data, right? So the cost of that would be, building it was complex, right? You have to write a tool for different types of functionality. We wound up with 8, 9, or 10 tools, which cover the landscape pretty well, but still, that's a lot of tools to write and to think about. Secondly, it's really not very conducive to working with multiple data sets. So if you're in a cyber use case, you very rarely are focused on one particular data set. Often it's the relationships between entities across data sets that's really what's meaningful. So we did try to hone in a little bit on what LakeWatch does alternatively. So this was a year ago. One of the things that LakeWatch, or rather the Genie environment which comes with LakeWatch, provides to you is an environment in which you're more comfortable running SQL. So if you were part of the transformation from, we used to build LangGraph agents, and now you can take a more generic harness that has capabilities to run bash commands, you get a lot more flexibility out of that. This is the same transformation but happening in the Databricks space, or in the data analysis space. We used to use ad hoc, very particular LangGraph tools. But now, if you can really manage that SQL runtime well, SQL kind of becomes your bash replacement, and you get a lot more flexibility. That's actually how Genie code operates, so we're able to leverage that a lot more for similar use cases. So it's really the call out that, hey, this is what we did, and here's some of the practical things we learned along the way in terms of prompting and giving the agent another goal. But if you were to build this today, you would build it in an entirely different way, and that's just a testament to how fast the space is moving.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of times we build something, and by the time we get to the finish line, or maybe a few months after we finish, we look back and we're like, the landscape is so different now. There's different tools that others have built to solve this problem. Maybe even you helped build one of those tools, and you're like, gosh, I wish I had that 6 months ago. So
it's crazy. I remember early days. It was LangGraph everything. So many early AI engineers come from data science backgrounds. Many of us were, Python specific, because that's kind of your data science ecosystem is very Python specific. And LangGraph was LangChain, LangGraph were we're Python AI agent repositories, right? But the way we think about agents is very different today as opposed to 2 years ago when a lot of this stuff was getting kicked off.
So anything from the talk that you wish had gone differently? Any kind of questions that never popped up that you were hoping to answer?
Yeah, I wish I would have had more questions about agents at the end, but really, I have opinions. I'm probably one of your more skeptical. Out of all the people who make a living building agents, I'm probably one of the more skeptical AI people. I probably come across as a fuddy-duddy sometimes. And a couple of things that I called out in the talk were things like, how many of you trust agents to make decisions for you? And so much of the talk at Databricks was around, hey, LLMs are incredibly capable now. The missing component is now the bridge between this model and the context that it would retrieve from your data. And one of the things that I was actually attempting to communicate was the LLMs are still capable, but if you work in cyber or financial services or healthcare and the model is right 90% of the time, that's still not enough. So they're getting better, but there is still a gap there, and we have to be conscious of that gap, and we have to understand how we still own the process in the midst of that. I was probably hoping for a little bit. Is it right to say I wanted to be more controversial? I don't know. Like, maybe it's because of my audience. I had a cyber audience, and I think many of them were very ready and willing to say, "Yep, I don't trust Asians," than maybe some other audiences might have been. But I think I would have loved to have some more discussion and perhaps debate around that front.
No, that's
Nice
awesome.
big sign that says "Leave your tinfoil hat at the door." Next time.
No, that's awesome. So I kind of want to open this up, generically to the three of you. And this comes with a little bit of salt in my own wounds. So, there's a whole submission process, right, for doing these talks. I went through it, right? I submitted my own talk. Mine just wasn't interesting enough because Postgres is boring now. However, there's a lot of cool things. Obviously, Lakewatch was chosen because it's new, it's interesting. A lot about AI agents. I think data modeling, in your case, Aaron, is tried and true and timeless. And I think a lot of people, when they see Data Vault in the Lakehouse, they're kind of scratching their head like, we've been told Medallion for so long. How does that work in this case? So, there's still a lot of interest there. But beyond just the interest, what does that submission process look like? Was there any kind of feedback given to you guys around, hey, we like your talk, maybe tweak this a little bit and you're in, or things like that? Was there any, kind of information back and forth? Any kind of prep that you had to do specifically for each of your talks?
So we were in the position of having a Databricks SSA come to us and say, hey, like, based on the work that you've done, like, we think y'all would be a great candidate to present at this conference. And that SSA was actually my co-presenter at the conference. So shout out Chandana. Thank you for working with me. That was a blast. So that helped a lot, right? That gave us a foot in the door. I think there is an advantage to having worked with products that Databricks is excited about and feel like play a core part in their future. So we've done a lot of work relating to agents and relating to things like Lakebase, which is used for memory, and other products that are really important to Databricks in their product strategy, and that was a help. In terms of support, we really didn't get very much. They have a platform through which you can upload your presentations and get some feedback. We never actually got feedback through that platform, but on site they had coaches that just that you could present in front of them and give some feedback in terms of. She was actually a professionally trained stage actress, so who was letting us give a presentation and helping us with delivery and with clarity and some of our points and those things. I thought that was extremely useful, just in terms of working out some of the stage fright and honing in our messaging a little bit.
Can I get Rearc to hire one for this for me, please? That would be pretty nice. No, that's interesting. I actually had no idea that they kind of gave you like basically a coach of, hey, here's some pointers, here's getting over nerves, things like that.
You had to go out of you had to know about it, and you had to sign up for you have to sign up for a session. So you might, if anybody's watching this and intends to speak at a Databricks conference, when you get there, you can schedule an appointment, and I thought it was well worth the time.
That's a fun nugget. Anything else around the submission process, like Aaron, Dylan, that you guys might have experienced that, might be like a lesser known fact, or how you knew you were chosen or anything like that? If it was even just like a boring email and you heard nothing until you got there, like, what was that experience like? Because I think being in the dark and preparing can be pretty daunting as well.
Yeah, I mean, I vaguely remember the submission process taking a little bit longer than I was expecting. I think I didn't have to do this, but I think my co-presenter or one of us had to submit a speech snippet or something to that effect. And then I do also remember running into some issues with, like, I think the pitch could only be 500 characters long. So we wanted to say a lot more. So we had to really, really cut down things. And then I remember there being some weird issue with trying to upload a headshot. Like, it was very, very specific of what you could or could not upload. But with us specifically, I think, we definitely benefited by having a, big enterprise brand name associated with the talk. But we initially got rejected. So that really kind of screwed up our plans a little bit. So we got rejected, like official confirmation, like rejection email. And then I just heard, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the fact that actually they turned around and accepted us. And so that led to a little bit of some craziness, having to, especially, book flights and stuff last minute to San Francisco with everything else going on. But I think potentially the reason why this happened to us is our talk very much coincided with Databricks' announcing their own kind of CDP that they were launching, and I think there was some talk as to whether ours was going to kind of complement that or kind of be in addition to it, or if it was a complete conflict of what they were presenting. So I think that might have been why we got a little bit we got a delay in our acceptance. But yeah, I mean, and as far as like the actual like after we got accepted, yeah, we had we had the ability to like upload our slides and all of that, but they wouldn't let us like after they gave us different like dates to when we could do that, and when we tried to do it, they wouldn't let us. The website wouldn't, so we were a little bit kind of in the dark as well. We were also in the dark as to like who our audience was. So initially we presented this a bit more technical, like more of a technical audience, but they came to us like weeks before and said it was more on their enterprise track. So we were expecting more business executives. So that also did kind of change how we pitched everything.
Yeah, you go from presenting like lines of code to, having to talk about high level architecture and things like that, which is actually like a pretty big pivot. Dylan, what about your experience? I know you were kind of thrown in last minute, you mentioned. So how did that go?
It was, so I can't remember. I was trying to find whether or not the Databricks team, so Rakesh and Shane, came to me and asked, or they went through Millen, but I just remember like someone asking me like, hey, would you be up for, doing a presentation this year? I said, yeah, no, I can do that. And then internally just like, yes, please, I want to do it. So I had to play it cool a little bit, but yeah, I was kind of brought in as like a third person to kind of finish off like the talking about Lake Watch part. So mine was, they mostly kind of similar to Riley, since they're Databricks, they kind of handled most of the internal kind of like document submission and talking to people about, registration and whatnot. I was actually already registered to go. I was already going to the summit to just kind of be there and talk about Lake Watch. So I was able to get my registration compensated and brought another React person along. But yeah, no, it was mostly just me trying to act cool and say like, yeah, no, I'd love to come do a session, no biggie. I'm already going to be there.
Yeah, then there's those of us that submitted and got the rejection email and
exactly.
Never heard anything. No, haha, psych, we change our minds or anything like that.
But now you have motive to hold on to hope for a couple weeks longer next time. All of us.
Yeah, right.
Get a rejection, like maybe.
Yeah. Well, now Rearc
maybe they'll
is
come back.
Seasons, presenters. We have talks under our belts. Maybe we have a little bit more sway.
Yeah, we've proven we're engineers that can also talk to people. I mean, come on, worth our weight in gold.
Which is why hosting a podcast, at a place like this is actually like a dream come true for me. It's a lot of fun. So let's talk a little bit more, kind of more generically about Summit in a conference like this, right? So you end up going to these conferences. There's huge amount of people, just stuff going on. If you want to pack your schedule, you can pack it and still have stuff that you want to do, but you're not able to make, things like that. Just kind of walk me through, like, what were you guys doing during the conference? Any interesting talks you were able to go to? Were you too busy to just do anything else? Was there other stuff going on? Just kind of give like a perspective on what going to these conferences is like.
Yeah. So we have the unique perspective of being partners at the summit. So my initial schedule was I'm going to have all these talks that I'm going to go to, do some prep work here and there, and then, just like feel it as we go. I think I was able to make it to one or two because of just getting there. When you're a presenter, you really feel the kind of anxiety come in once you get to like a couple of days before your presentation. So it was mostly around like, let me tweak this, let me tweak that, let me just work on my presentation. And then from our partner situation, we're going to meet with a client, we're going to meet with this, person from Databricks that we haven't, seen in real life yet. After hours kind of sessions that we sponsor. So it was kind of hard to get 2 sessions actually, to be honest.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I went in, I remember getting on the website in a hurry when they announced the schedule because I wanted to book my sessions in advance to make sure I could get to all of them. And the couple days leading to my talk, the anxiety bus kind of hits you. Like, I have stuff I have to do, and the internet was not good at the summit. And I found out the day of the talk that they had a special internet for people who were presenting. That didn't work for me either, so I actually spent a good chunk of the time leading up to my presentation making components of the app I intended to demo less network hungry so that it would run more smoothly in the demo itself, and that took up a lot of my time. Thankfully, they had a presenter room, or a preparation room where I could work on some of those things. Maybe like Dylan said, there were a couple talks I was in. One of them was on like agent evaluations in the cyberspace. So how do you know that they're doing what you want them to be doing? I think it was a phishing use case CVS was giving. Super cool stuff. And I got through like 30 minutes and had to bail to head over to a client meeting and that kind of stuff. So I will say the keynotes were awesome. Sometimes you get like big ideas heading to a conference, what it's going to be like, but getting to a keynote where they've got 15 screens from wall to wall and what feels like an underground football field, for crying out loud in terms of the size. You had 30-something thousand people in one big room. The smoke machines.
They gave me a
that
headache.
that was not an experience I was ready for. I thought it was pretty cool, but
Yeah. Imagine walking into a room where there's a main stage, and then there are about 10 or so, like on either side, 5 different screens that go out the other ways. They're shooting lasers everywhere. It's a dark room, and they got fog machines, and they're blasting K-pop Demon Hunters in a base system that, rocks the chairs. That was walking into the keynote.
I'm glad they did
I'm
that
proud.
though, because I mean, it did start at 8 in the morning, so it was nice. Like, especially for coming all the way across the country, it's nice to get woken up like that, especially in a really dark room.
The lines getting in though. Remember? So there was this line that stretched from like the front door of the Summit building to the block, 100 yards away.
Yeah.
To get into the building, and then another line to get downstairs, and then another line to get into the room. It moved really fast. I was surprised by that. But
Yeah.
my goodness.
If you want to go to the summit and you want to see a keynote and you want to sit next to other people that you better meet before you get into the building. I saved 2 or 3 seats for like Aaron and Riley and other people. Trying to convey where I'm at in a room full of like 20,000 people is impossible. And then those seats don't last long because they just cram people in there.
Yeah, I remember being there last year, and I don't think there was the line situation. It was a bit more chaotic, and it was kind of grab your own seat, so maybe that's why the lines exist now.
It moved efficiently. They did a good job getting a ton of people in there relatively quickly.
Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
standing around for a very long time. We were always moving.
Yeah, I'm sure they planned it well. Yeah, I'm not sure if my actually, having a daughter, my wake-up call is K-pop Demon Hunters blasting pretty regularly, so maybe that wouldn't be all that different. But so beyond, just kind of going to talks, going to keynotes, what those are like, is there anything interesting that kind of comes up? I think a lot of us too are kind of working with clients at the same time. You guys mentioned client meetings. Kind of walk me through those. What are those like?
Before, just in terms of the experience in general, one thing I noticed, and it was super kind of like glass of cold water on my head. I got on the plane and was heading to the Bay Area for this conference. I'm coming from the Raleigh area. And, we feel like the things we're doing, especially, I work on AI all the time, but it's not like everybody's working on AI all the time. We see graphics about AI adoption. It's a pretty low number, but I was on a plane heading to the Bay Area, and I'm sitting between 2 people that have, like Slack open and code, and they're building agents, and they're like chatting to people about agents. They're talking about agents. They talk to each other about agents, and I'm sitting here thinking like, I thought I was special. So it's weird when you go to a conference where like these things that still feel quite niche to us are very not niche. You get off the plane in San Francisco, and every billboard is some kind of AI product. So that was pretty crazy. I will say, just from meeting with clients, from meeting with other people, because you're being exposed to so many people who are thinking about how really they make these tools work for their enterprises or for their small orgs or whatever. It's been around so little, and there's been so much advancement so fast. To get exposed to so many different opinions, so many different companies who are building things different ways with this kind of tools. It was really a lot of fun, and to bounce ideas back and forth across these things. Everybody's enthusiastic about these topics, whether it's data, AI, more particularly ML, whatever. So I thought just getting to have more of those conversations with people who are solving problems different ways was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's really, it's one of those things too where I remember early on in my career, being a data person, not running across a lot of other data people. I think it was more common for someone to call themselves a software engineer at that time. I feel like that's making a comeback. Who knows? But being a data person and saying I'm a data engineer and stuff like that, but then going to a conference or a talk or something that's, data focused was very eye-opening, and it's, these are all the people doing the same things I am. They're they're living the same life I am, doing the exact same stuff day to day. It kind of brings a unique perspective and really kind of changes your mentality around like I'm, like I don't know, an iceberg in an ocean to, I'm actually just part of the water, like everyone's in here. That's a weird analogy, but
not a nature podcast.
Not a nature podcast, exactly. Maybe we should bring more water analogies into this. So walk me through what a client meeting is. I think a lot of people hear that, and I think most of them think that, New Energy Queensland is, just buying you some drinks at a bar or something like that, and you're talking with execs. What actually goes on during those client meetings? Like, how are they conducted? Is there any kind of useful insight? Is there even a reason to have them? Should we just, call it free drinks and move on, right? Just kind of curious on your perspectives on that.
Yeah, so there's a few different ones. So like sometimes, we get the opportunity, like a Databricks, salesperson sets up an office for us to talk in the Databricks office. And like we have, sometimes it's, going to get tacos and trying not to, get your nice clothes dirty while you're talking about Databricks. But either way, like honestly, it is very refreshing to talk about problems in person, if that makes sense. Like I have a really fun time usually in those client meetings because it's oftentimes like they just are describing this problem, and then I can, or someone from the team can like start just like talking about like, oh yeah, we've seen that. This is how we like, this is like our solution for that we do on Databricks, or this is what our recommendation is. Like well, you shouldn't do it this way. You should do it that way. Like having a whiteboard in person. I can't remember the last time I was actually able to actually whiteboard an idea. So yeah, it's a good time being able to get face to face with clients because it's a lot easier to just kind of talk about the problems, in real life.
Yeah, no, I'm sure the literal FaceTime actually helps there. All right, so let's move into some of the announcements that Databricks made during Summit. I don't want to just give a full recap. I think plenty of other people can go watch whoever's video to get a recap because there's like a million out there. But what I want to ask each of you is, and I'll kind of do the same going around, starting with Aaron. What is your like favorite announcement that came out, and why are you excited about it?
I think my answer's changed a little bit since I've kind of seen some different use cases recently. But the things around, I think LTAP. So kind of uniting like the lake house, the lake base, like together. So like kind of like essentially, so you have, one set of data and different engines depending on your use case to kind of access it and manipulate it and things like that. Just because like, I've been in kind of the, the Delta Lake space for the last couple of years without really going back to relational databases much at all. Or really kind of interacting with them in any way. And I just like being able to have one set of data to avoid like, having a separate pipeline to resync your data or have CDC and things like that. And like even some of the other things announced with Lakebase are, I think, pretty crazy. Because I mean, like the last time I used relational databases and we wanted to, we might have like a staging database, for example, and then kind of one in production. But the problem is that if you have multiple engineers working on that staging database, like things are going to get very messy very quickly. And being able to like just like create a new branch and like based off what's going on in production and create a new branch and then kind of work on that. And then there's not much extra storage fees cost for that and things like that. It's quite crazy. So like I was expecting the AI talks, the AI announcements, and there were a lot of them, of course, but like seeing how they were changing some of the architecture and design was also pretty cool as well.
I am curious. I'm going out of turn here, so my apologies. I'm surprised you didn't mention a Lakehouse RT.
Lakehouse RT? I just haven't...
sorry, not RT, or Raiden, the compute engine.
The same, yeah. The Raiden
those are the same. That's what
powers the real time.
Just as a data engineer, I'm curious if that was just because everybody's already talking about it, or what your thoughts are on that front.
It's just something that I haven't looked at in too much detail. Like I didn't really ever deal with a use case of needing data that quickly to like power dashboards and things like that. So it just isn't really on my radar. And I mean, other than like I remember I did want to go to a talk to understand like what was actually going on in the back end that I wasn't able to get into. But yeah, it just isn't really too much on my radar.
Yeah, that'll segue to mine really well because mine was Raiden, and I'll tell you that the use cases from my world around like observability was super cool because we have been talking with clients. So cybersecurity oftentimes coincides a lot with like IT operations. So like incident management isn't always, a threat actor. Sometimes it's just, this service is down, whether that is through malicious activity or not. Observability requires that kind of like super fast, like we need to be able to like see things like as they're coming in immediately. So that Raiden engine, we've been hearing tales about it for a while now when we talk about people trying to like replace things like Prometheus. And we're like, well, we can't hit quite the same, metrics right now. And then Databricks come back and says like, just wait. But yeah, Raiden, the real-time engine is going to be super cool once we get our hands on it.
I hear that all the time from Databricks. Just wait, it's coming.
Just wait.
It usually does, within a few months of hearing that. So at least that's reassuring.
Yeah, it's also going to be super cool in terms of like enabling things that you don't have right now on Databricks, like full text search. So like combining that with like indexing Delta tables and like being able to have like not just like hot storage, like really quickly accessible like data, but also like very fast compute on top of it is going to open up a lot for us in terms of like real-time detections, which are super important. I'm going to cheat a little bit too because I have two of them. The Panther acquisition was my second. That was very surprising news to me when I came in because when I started with Rearc, I think I was like the second cyber hire and like the other engineer with me was like fresh out of school. So it's like me and him as like the only cyber people and being asked like, hey, what does Lake architecture look like in the cybersecurity world? And it's like, I think, yeah, I've heard of Panther. Panther is like the big name in this. They were like 2 years ago, like one of the only names. Now you have like Hunter and Sentinel. But Panther, I think, was exclusively on Snowflake as their like kind of like source lake architecture. So it's going to be very interesting to see like this very well built platform that delivers cybersecurity also using Databricks and also being able to leverage that. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, I think for me, narrowing this down to one is hard. They had a few announcements coming from the agent space. Lakebase was one. We've used Lakebase a lot for checkpointing. So as you're building an agent, you need something to manage the context and memory of an agent. And Lakebase and its Postgres capabilities are a very seamless transition there if you're used to using frameworks like LangGraph that have natural integrations with Postgres. But the ability to extend that to, well, you can have data in Lakebase. And there's the risks of letting LLMs touch your data and potentially make modifications to your data. So just like you would set up Git work trees to protect your code as LLMs play with it, you can set up branches on Postgres via Lakebase to interact with your data to validate changes. I thought was fascinating. But like Dylan, I'm going to cheat. I think the more interesting one to me was Omnigent, and I don't think Omnigent's getting a lot of hype. So this is a harness. So if you think about an agent being an LLM that drives around and accomplishes tasks, think of a harness as being your tool that encapsulates the raw agent loop functionality plus a framework for containing your skills and your tools that you're accustomed to as part of your typical coding agents. So one of the things we've been seeing a lot recently is these two things that are at odds with each other. One is you'd love to be able to switch models because different models are good at different things. They have different cost and benefit relationships. A model might disappear and cease to be available today or tomorrow, like we saw with Mythos and Fables. So the ability to be flexible to models that you use or to switch quickly is really valuable. At the same time, if you want to switch from using Claude in Claude Code, using Claude model to using a GPT model, you probably have to go from Claude Code to Codex. Well, what happens to your skills? What happens to your MCP servers? They don't really come with you. So the idea of Omnigent is that it sits on top of these other harnesses. So instead of simply invoking a Claude model, what it actually does if you have your Claude Code hooked up to Omnigent is you can say, hey, go use Claude Code for this task, or go use Codex for this task. So you get this advantage of using models within their harnesses, but keeping these components that you're building over time to be more tailored to your own use, or if it's not a personal coding agent, but an agent that you're building for your organization, and you're keeping those skills and components in a repo, it makes it so flexible. And I find, we were talking earlier about moving from your very bespoke tooling with things like LangGraph to what you get if you can run bash commands, or what you get when you can run SQL. And what you need is the governance and the containerization so you can do those things safely. And we know that's a place where Databricks really excels. But what was kind of lacking was that ability to stitch that into something that makes it very easy to switch models as well. And they've kind of filled that gap a little bit with Omnigen. So I thought that was super exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I think I'm with you, like there's not a lot of hype around this, but I think as people start to implement it and start to use it, I don't know if they're going to look back at all at that point. And I think we're headed in that direction. There's a lot more tooling coming out that's kind of more agnostic to kind of everything coming out, but you're still able to run everything that's coming out, right? What's interesting to me is the model switching and being able to do that. I think that's actually a very underrated feature for this. And I think the big thing too there is I think we're probably, I'm just going to make a prediction here. I think we're probably, 6 months to a year out from like time of use pricing on certain models. I just kind of see the writing on the wall and knowing how things have gone in the past in tech. So knowing that and having a harness on top where you can say, during this time, use this model, during this time, use this model, right? And kind of game that appropriately to benefit cost as well as performance. You'll really get a lot of bang for your buck out of this.
Yeah, and it really fits well with the reality right now. So, Codex, Claude Code, if you're working with these models, they're very heavily subsidizing the subscription plans, right? But if you are requesting something from Claude via another coding harness and you're using the API, you're paying API pricing. So there's kind of the benefit of using the harness to take advantage of your subscription plan, which is usable within that harness. Although I know Claude Code at least has kind of nixed that, but I think they reversed that to allow you to take advantage of your subscription-based pricing if you're invoking it that way. Another thing is we're increasingly seeing harnesses. So model providers like Anthropic or OpenAI, when they build a harness, they fine-tune those models to be performant within their harnesses. To the extent where open source tools have had to add apply patch tools because Codex has an apply patch tool call, and they tune their GPT models to use that tool call. So other open source agents like OpenCode have to actually add that tool because the models are so biased towards calling the tool. So you're getting the flexibility and allowing those models to work in an environment in which they're proving to be performant, which is super interesting.
Yeah, no, all awesome stuff. I think, the announcements this year were kind of crazy, and with how many there were and how big some of them were, you can definitely tell Databricks has been hard at work. So we're going to close out here with just kind of some final remarks and thoughts that each of you have. So I think the big thing is, what are some key takeaways from, giving a presentation at a conference like this, as well as I would love to hear, what would you want done differently? Maybe not even from your perspective, but even from the conference perspective. Is there feedback you'd love to give Databricks? Hey, I'd like to see this at next year's conference, or eventually implement something like this. And I'm happy to hear if it's as dumb as the food sucked all the way to, maybe there's a better way to give talks or something like that. Let's start with Aaron.
I mean, I think as a presenter, the biggest takeaway is try to get enough reps in the closest context as possible to the actual speech. I think what I ran into with, my co-presenter who's, from a different company and also very, very busy, it was hard for us to really do the talk, and we have a lot of back and forth in the talk, so do the talk together versus just our separate parts individually. But once we got to the conference, we were able to find a room that was empty, that was pretty much like the one we presented in. Once we were able to do a couple reps there, it was okay, this is gonna go well. But there was a lot of uncertainty before then, even uncertainty especially when we're working on different parts, are these gonna actually mesh together? And then for the conference as a whole, I think one thing I would definitely suggest for people going future years is to, especially the more technical speeches, to book those right away, because they do fill up very, very quickly, and you don't want to. Yeah, I think there's a waiting list that you could go to, but you're not guaranteed to get in. And so if I'm done Databricks then I would hopefully get bigger rooms if that's possible for a lot of these speeches. And then also just there's so many announcements. It's just it's hard to keep track of what everything's going on, what is ready today, what's going to be ready in a couple months. and just like have like a one clear spot to be able to see everything that was announced, because there's a lot of cool things. This moves a lot faster. There's a lot more things than like a lot of these other conferences. So just better organization there.
Yeah, I think like almost if you like came into the first keynote handing you like a playbill that had all their announcements, what it means and when it's released, or like if it's being upgraded to like general public or, that kind of stuff, right? And I actually would kind of give the same feedback there. I think something like that, just like a little cheat sheet, would be extremely useful.
From my side, the speakers out there that may be listening, something that I only did one of them and it helped, and I wish I did more of them, was even if you think you're anxious and you need to spend more time tweaking your presentation, go see other sessions, because it helped a lot viewing other speakers. It, calmed me down, at least, somebody else who, it doesn't have to be perfect. Other people are doing it, you kind of get into the spirit of like kind of just like going up there, speak a little extemporaneously, show what you know. So I would recommend that to anybody who's speaking at any engagement, really, is, just don't spend too much time staring at the minute of your presentation. Some constructive feedback for Databricks is a single sign-on between in the app was difficult sometimes. Logging into that app was not the easiest thing to do, especially with, the Wi-Fi in that building. It was a little bit slow. And then I think the last thing that I wish I saw was a bigger, or maybe like a more dedicated space for just trying things out. Like I know they had a hackathon, but you kind of had to like be a part of it. Just like a space where like if, Lakewatch is this product and I'm a cybersecurity person and I want to see what it looks like to like, run a search in a notebook on Lakewatch or whatever, have some systems where I can just kind of go in and like, game test it or whatever. That would have been really cool.
I will say, and to give ourselves a bit of a plug there, especially if we're running a booth. Typically, partners of Databricks will have booths in the exhibition hall, and you can go in there, and a lot of times they will be demoing things and showing you new features and stuff that they have access to already up and ready to go so that you can see it end to end. So that is something that doesn't always happen, but can happen, and I've certainly seen it before.
It also took me way too long to realize there was food in the expo hall. I spent a lot of time running across the street to grab food. Food was great, by the way. No complaints. In terms of tips for speakers, I know one thing that was helpful to me. I used to do a lot of demos, and I gave a demo once, and the feedback came back was, it sounds salesy. And like that, I have never gotten that out of my head, right? That like is burned into my brain forever. And I know one of the things that really helped me to be a little bit more comfortable on the stage was taking a lot of time to think. Like what's something I feel like I can show on the stage and speak to on the stage that I genuinely believe in, that I think other engineers need to know. And being an AI, obviously lots of opinions going around, I just wanted to take the time to feel like what's something I could stand behind, to where if I totally forgot what was on my slides and I totally lost track of what was on my notes and a person came up in front of me and asked, hey, what do you think about this? We could have a conversation and I could share things that I felt like were helpful. That made it a lot easier to kind of build a presentation around something I was excited about, as well as to just speak to it with some enthusiasm, because these are things that I would genuinely probably start talking about even if you didn't ask, which probably annoys some people. And related to that, as far as feedback, I think one of the things I would love to see is maybe a different kind of session where there's more open dialogue about places where there might not necessarily be agreement. And I think if you go the opposite, then it does feel salesy. And so much of what Databricks had to portray in terms of AI was, we think the AI has arrived, it's merely context. And I really like Databricks' strategy regarding AI, and I love their tooling and their platform. So I'm on board there, and I think the stuff they're all building is going to be helpful. So to me as an engineer, I'm excited. But I don't necessarily agree with the premise that AGI is here and the only gap is the context. And I know that there are many who have experience in this space who have used these tools a ton who would fall on opposite sides of that debate. And I feel like there would be similar opinions regarding the pros and cons of Lakewatch as a sim as opposed to alternatives or other things that exist. And I think if you could get some people that could go back and forth on the pros and cons would resonate well with a Databricks audience that cares a lot about openness. It's one of the things that's been foundational to Databricks since their founding. And I think would just serve really well to make this an event that helps us to learn and to grow as we're being exposed to these technologies together and trying to figure out how best to use them. I think it would help Databricks better to understand what exactly needs to be built and what people are on board for too. So that would probably just be one thing I'd add.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much for watching Streams, Lakes, and Deltas Not a Nature podcast. We will certainly be recording more episodes like this, and feel free to give us any feedback in the comments. Thanks again.